Welcome to Education in Focus. I'm Eliana Kernodle. U.S. Secretary of Education Linda McMahon spoke at the Reagan Institute Summit on Education last week. Joining us to tell us a little more about this is the Center Square's education reporter, Esther Wickham. Esther, give us some of the highlights.
Yeah, thanks, Aliana. So, Secretary McMahon, as you said, spoke at RISE, Reagan Institute Summit on Education, hosted by the Ronald Reagan Institute in Washington, D.C. And she was one speaker of many other education officials, governors, and education secretaries of state departments. But focusing specifically on her interview, she was questioned by the Indiana Education Secretary Katie Jenner, talking about a broad range of education subjects. So she emphasized, the importance of literacy, artificial intelligence, civil discourse, and education funding. These are all, big issues that the Trump administration, specifically the U.S. Department of Education, has been talking about, specifically when it comes to the presidential AI challenge, which we've talked about, literacy and proficiency scores, declining in the country with scores being at an all-time low, as well as education funding, where the Department of Education is launching investigations into schools, specifically higher education institutes, to look at civil rights violations and potential funding freezes for programs that don't align with the Trump administration's goals, and ultimately they claim violation of the law. And so in this interview, she kind of dove into all those different things, and at the end of the day, what the department's goal is for bringing education, literacy, and innovation back to the states. For the past couple of weeks, the Secretary of Education, Linda McMahon, has been traveling to different states in an effort to emphasize bringing back education and overall control to the locals at the local level, as well as the statewide level. She's traveled to states like South Carolina, Minnesota, Mississippi, Iowa, other states. She's continuing to go to those schools, meet with superintendents, school districts, educators, teachers, students, and parents to really give them best tools and best practices that she has learned as secretary, as well as what the department hopes to pass on, as the Trump administration has announced many times. They continue an effort to dissolve the department as a whole. And the Center Square recently reported that this plan will hopefully be completed by the end of 2029. So a couple of years. President Trump will be out of office at that time, but the actions taken by the administration will completely dissolve the Department of Education, with the ultimate goal, as they claim, to give these states and these local school districts the power to reinstate these tools and practices that they hope to leave. Something else she emphasized in her talk was talking about civil discourse within education. And she, mentioned the brutal assassination of conservative influencer Charlie Kirk as an example of the lack of that within schools, mentioning that, it starts with classrooms, it starts with students. They have to be respectful to each other when they talk about, controversial subjects. Eliana, we talked a little bit a couple weeks ago of different schools, specifically within higher education, that over 70% of college students don't want to talk about controversial issues. They think it's okay to shout down a speaker that's coming to their college campus. And McMahon believes that these slow habits, form and start in the classroom at an early age, K through 12 education. A big goal for this administration is to instill that civil discourse is the best way to have meaningful and controversial discussions, but still be friends at the end of the day. kind of switching over to when the Department of Education started back in 1980, she discussed, funding within education, which has also been a hot topic to talk about, specifically since the education department has taken multiple legal action, investigations, lawsuits, restrictions of federal funding when it comes to not only colleges and universities, but also school districts, K through 12 education. And, she talks about how since its conception, the Department of Education has spent over $3 trillion on education. And a recent report that the National Education Association, looked at the test scores, the progress students are making in America, and she states that they are at a historic all time low. And this is what she had to say during the interview.
Well, if we just look at what's happened since the Department of Education was put in place in 1980, we spent $3 trillion, and the scores have continued to come down. Sometimes they've plateaued, sometimes they did a little uptick, but if you really look at the scores, they've come down. We spent that money. Where is it gone? What can we show for it? And the Department of Education has been in place. And the answer was throw more money at it, spend more money here, spend more money there, and we've not seen the results. Mm-hmm. So I think that when we return education to the states, people like secretaries of state and chiefs, commissioners throughout every state, teachers, parents, principals, working together, know where those needs are in their states. There is no one size fits all in education, you know that. Mm-hmm. And so we have to tailor that education for the areas, and who better to do that than those who are there locally? Mm-hmm. I think that education should also serve the communities on which the schools are located, because what we need in the workforce and working with the different businesses in those areas, when we start looking at high school and community colleges working together, et cetera, who better knows that than the people on the ground? And I think that our companies and industries should be consulted on helping to structure, all of those different programs. And I'm kind of blending a couple of things here, but it's just very important to be local, with those dollars, because they'll be better spent because the people who are spending them locally know where they need to go.
Another thing the secretary emphasizes is, since this funding is so critical, and as we've seen through the data, test scores are at an all time low, proficiency in math and reading and writing just is not, computing with how much funding these districts and these education departments are receiving. Something that McMahon and the Trump administration have also emphasized is funding in school choice, and really emphasizing the fact that school choice shouldn't be partisan. It doesn't have to be a partisan issue. They want to, like I said before, give these states and these local districts the ability, not only just on a practical level, like here's some tips and tricks of what to do with when it comes to education, but also like federal funding, so that education doesn't just start in the classroom, but also continues in the home. That parents are equipped and that they're given the tools and opportunity to expand their child's education if they decide to do charter school, homeschool, private education, like we talked about before, pod schooling, which is a new thing. And so I think as the National Assessment of Educational Progress reports continue to come out, and we see statewide and kind of nationally, America is not really doing the greatest. A recent report from the World Literacy of Education came out that America is ranked 36th, globally for literacy in America, and so we can kind of see that this is a big issue, and I think that the education department, as McMahon has stated, is trying to figure out solutions to combat it.
Well, Esther, thank you for your insights on this story. You can keep up with this story and more at thecentersquare.com.